You've heard of it, haven't you? The Legend of Sparta? When I was young...
Devil May Cry fucking 3. Thus far, we've experienced first the charming infancy and then the awkward, stumbling adolescence of the DMC series, but now we've arrived at the glorious adulthood of Devil May Cry. This is where just about everything snaps into place and the series finds a consistent identity. Everything about this game is an improvement, if not an outright quantum leap over what came before. The graphics receive a noticeable improvement, the music is top-notch, the gameplay has not only returned to its former DMC1 glory but made layers more complex, and the story is actually good, and not just ironically good like the first game story. I mean, like, it can actually stand on its own as a legitimate piece of literary art. I will be honest, before we get too deep into this, that I have a lot of nostalgia for this game in particular, and I'll be doing my best to fight off the rose-tinted glasses, but I felt it only fair to you all that I come clean about my affection for DMC3 specifically. This was the game that got me into the series, having picked it up out of curiosity from my local gaming watering hole when I was 16. I really can't overstate how radically different that this game was from anything I'd played up to that point. Partially due to a sheltered upbringing, but also just due to the interests all my friends and I had at the time, and my general lack of knowledge about video games back then. I was the only person in my group of friends with a PS2, which I'd only bought because it was cheaper than the Xbox, and 10-year-old me really wanted to play Kingdom Hearts, because, hey, Disney! My friends all having Xboxes and me bumming it at their houses most of the time, we were all mostly into Western games back then. Halo, KOTOR, Age of Empires, Call of Duty, well before the Modern Warfare days, stuff like that. I just really wasn't very exposed to a lot of Japanese stuff beyond whatever was put up by Nintendo. So imagine the absolute shock to my system when I popped this game into my PlayStation only to be greeted with this. Everything about it was just so cool. Dante was like no protagonist I was used to. He looked evil in the face and laughed, made jokes, had fun. He walked into danger with such total confidence that you almost believed the absolute monstrosity you were about to fight was really just a loser punk. Granted, I only appreciated Dante's character on a superficial level as a teenager. I was too caught up in the power fantasy, but even on that superficial level, this game is thoroughly enjoyable. But I can't just keep building this game up all day long. There's so much to see on display here, so let's get right into that good shit as I gleefully help you get into.
Wanna know the name? Devil May Cry.
So after the huge debacle that was DMC2, Itsuno had a huge challenge in front of him, trying to re-legitimize the series. Luckily for all of us, he and his team were far better equipped to handle things. Rather than stick to the slapdash direction of the second game, Itsuno and his team decided to take things back to what worked and look at DMC1 for inspiration, and believe me, it shows. It also worked. As you can see from the sales numbers, DMC3 on initial release actually underperformed even compared to Devil May Cry 2. But a year later, when the special edition was announced and word of mouth got around that Devil May Cry was good again, it sold another solid 1 million copies, blowing past even Devil May Cry 1. In service of this fresh start for the series, DMC3 makes like Metal Gear Solid and is in fact a prequel to the first game, showing the story of Dante's first experience in saving the world and starting the business that he runs come the first game. It's also considered something of a reboot in that it retcons certain story details from previous games, which is always a risky business, but personally I think the changes ultimately improved the series' lore, as well as granted the DMC3 team the freedom to do the crazy shit they wanted to do. Of course, having a prequel means that Dante would be significantly younger than in DMC 1 or 2, so a new voice actor again would be needed. This is where Just Cause comes in. No, not that Just Cause, the company Just Cause. Headed up by Ruben Langdon, who these days is the de facto English voice actor for Dante. This production company cut its teeth on previous Capcom titles, providing localization support and acting talent, including this fancy new technology called motion capture, which had quickly become standard in big-budget games around this time. Suddenly, it was desirable for voice actors to also be able to do mocapping and stunt work, and for an action-intensive series like Devil May Cry, it was practically necessary. So, who do you go to? Why, the fucking Power Rangers, of course! Specifically, Ruben had experience doing stunt work on Power Rangers Time Force, and managed to pull in the Quantum Ranger himself, Daniel Southworth, to portray one of the game's antagonists, Virgil, with not only his very distinct voice, but also mocapping alongside Ruben. Really, it was thanks to Ruben and Just Cause that the English performance and localization were as good as they were. Just Cause was the crucial link in getting Western talent on board with the game, and helped to ensure that the goofily translated lines like the ones from DMC1's script
Lock off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
got toned down or altered to something a little more believable. And unlike DMC2, when I say toned down, I don't mean complete silence, I mean you can actually take the script and dialogue seriously. Most of the time. And DMC3 has some pretty fucking raw moments. DMC1 has a lot of quotable lines because they made us laugh. DMC3 has a lot of quotable lines because the lines are fucking bangers. But also every VA involved in this game absolutely kills it. Ruben Langdon, Daniel Southworth, Kerry Walgren, Adam D. Clark, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, and many others, whether their parts were big or small, all brought their A game. Or should I say their S game. Ruben admitted that the actual production on Capcom's side was kind of a disorganized mess, so he just ended up doing whatever he felt was right for the character, which not only is in the spirit of Dante himself, but also the reason his performance is so iconic. Starting with DMC3 and going forward, Ruben would voice every appearance of Dante, and despite a lot of fans initially not liking his take on the character, is pretty much inseparable from him at this point. Now, before we get into the game itself, there is a clarification I need to make. So the HD collection specifically includes DMC3 Special Edition, which is what we did in the days before DLC. We just released the game again, but better. The reason I bring this up is, on top of Special Edition having a fair amount of stuff the original version didn't have, there is a funny story revolving around DMC3's initial release in America that the Special Edition was, in part, made to fix. To make a long story short, the original DMC3 North American release was harder than any other version, due to Capcom USA pushing, for some reason, to replace normal mode with hard mode, and hard mode with a difficulty that did not officially exist, but is now known as very hard. Special Edition fixed this so that Americans finally got a normal difficulty, as well as including the very hard difficulty. But guess who didn't get that fucking memo and bought the original version of the game in 2008 and didn't have no normal mode? Talk about a trial by fire. So, as we finally get to talking about the video game this video is supposed to be about, be thankful for your normal mode. It could have been much, much worse. So right off the bat, you can tell this game is something special. The music is haunting and memorable, and I'll say it right now, this game's music is my favorite in the series, no contest. When it wants to bust out something to get you pumped up to wreck some demon shit, you better believe it comes full force. But other times like now, its music can tone down and become kind of beautiful. It makes the atmosphere of this intro so prevalent, filled with both mystery and suspense as it abruptly cuts from the cold blues and grays of a rainy moonlit night and Dante's seemingly impending doom, to the warmer colors of sunset inside his office, where Dante seems to be just going about his day. We're back in the Devil May Cry shop, or at least our boy's first attempt at it. As is quickly established, he hasn't officially opened yet, or even chosen a name for his business. And it's as we learn this that Dante receives a visitor. One who is polite enough to at least not bust down his door with a motorcycle as he—
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
This Nosferatu-looking motherfucker is Arkham, and he makes it very clear that he's in the know as to who Dante is.
Is your name Dante, son of Sparta?
Where did you hear that?
From your brother. He sent this invitation for you. Please accept it.
Invitation, huh?
This opening scene is great because it gives us a perfect idea of Dante's character in this game, but there's a specific moment in this scene that summarizes him perfectly in my opinion. There. You see that? No words spoken, no dialogue of any kind, just a character performing an action that informs the player without cramming it down their throats. Dante is surrounded by scythe-wielding demons, and instead of grabbing a weapon, he grabs his lunch. The fight scene that follows is not only fun to watch, with yet another banging music track, and further informs us of Dante's cockiness and carefree attitude, but also a sort of showcase for what you can expect from the game. A lot of the big, flashy moves in this cutscene, you can do them in the game. Some more practical than others, but the fact remains that you can do them, which is sick. And now we're dropped right into gameplay, and what is this? What is a tutorial? I've never seen this in a DMC game. But in all seriousness, DMC3 takes the radical step of teaching you how to play the video game, which is smart considering how much more complex DMC3 is compared to the previous titles. If you've played DMC1, which everyone watching this video should have by now, then you understand the basics already. The 3-hit combo, delayed input for alternate combos, helm splitter, launcher, gunplay, all the good stuff. What's new this time around are the styles. Styles are, obviously, various fighting styles that you can equip much like weapons. You start with 4, though there are others you earn by progressing through the game, and they do a good job of accommodating different playstyles. They're listed in a rough order of difficulty, but you may find one of the supposedly harder styles more conducive to your personal preferences. The default style is the Trickster style, which is focused on movement options and evasion. Each style binds a unique action to the circle button on a PlayStation controller and the B button on an Xbox. Trickster starts with a dash that provides you with iframes to avoid damage if you time it well. I say start because styles can be leveled up if you use them for long enough, granting you even more abilities. There's also my personal favorite, Swordsmaster, for those of us who just really like to hit things with sharp objects. It grants you an additional attack both on the ground and in the air, allowing you to more easily up your style points. For the dirty, filthy DMC2 enthusiasts, there's the Gunslinger style that allows you to do some really flashy tricks with each of the game's guns, and allows you to charge your shots and fire slightly faster. Finally, arguably the most difficult style to use is Royal Guard. This style works on a parry system. Time your parry perfectly to charge a devastatingly powerful counterattack for massive damage and style. Speaking of your style, the style meter has undergone a few changes as well. On top of there now being a new ranking system, going from D to SSS, the style meter is now an honest-to-god meter, meaning you can now more accurately keep track of how close you are to bumping up or down a rank. This is made doubly helpful because, now more than ever, variety is the spice of life, and your final score. You may remember back in the DMC1 video that I mentioned in later games you couldn't just fall back on 1 or 2 combos if you wanted a decent style rank.
If you just continue to press the same button like X, 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 and Y, 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 and X, X, and Y, Y, Y again, you'll be sucked.
Well, that day is finally here. Be aware of the tools that you have at your disposal and use all of them. So now you've gotten a taste of what's to come, and the game really starts to get going. The next mission is a slightly larger brawl ending in the first boss fight of the game. And just listen to those sweet, sweet DMC1 sound effects. Once you've dealt with it, you'll be treated to a cutscene that gives us a better idea of just what the hell is happening as a massive fuck-off tower of evil erupts from the ground, a mysterious figure standing atop it.
Camelot! 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 It's only a model.
The boss fucks off and Dante decides to head towards the tower, declaring that he knows that his twin brother Virgil was the one who raised it, and that it's been a year since they last met. Yeah, Virgil, remember him? Awkward. To address anyone who might be confused about the "it's been a year" line, it's a reference to a short manga that was published leading up to the game's release. It expounds a little on the backstory of the game, during which Dante and Virgil meet once before, but I would hardly consider it required reading. Other than this vague line, it's never really called back to. But speaking of Virgil, we cut to him and Arkham atop said fuck-off evil tower. Turns out, they're working together, and indeed were responsible for raising the tower, called Temin Negru, say that 5 times fast, and reveal that in conjunction with said tower raising they were in search of Dante, more specifically his half of the amulet that their mother gave them as children. What purpose the amulet serves is left a mystery, although if you were observant during your DMC1 playthrough, you should already have an idea. And now we have another great character establishing moment. From the footage that's already been shown, it should be obvious that Virgil is the opposite of Dante in almost every way. The classic blue Oni to his red Oni, cool-headed versus headstrong, color-coded for our convenience. But when the Reaper we just defeated arrives at the top of the tower, we get a real sense of just what we're walking into. In just one effortless sword stroke, Virgil utterly eviscerates an enemy that was in turn strong enough to be considered a boss battle to Dante. No dialogue, no comparing numbers or power levels, just a well-directed scene allowing the player to absorb information naturally. It's understandable from the intro cutscene to think that Dante and Virgil are roughly equals, but this scene right here establishes for the player that Dante never really had a fucking chance. At the moment, Virgil is straight up out of our league. But, out of either ignorance or overconfidence, Dante charges forward through the ruined city streets up to the entrance of the tower. Along the way, this is the point where the game starts to introduce you to a lot of the extra goodies in the game, most of which should look familiar. Right away, you'll probably notice that good old Goddess of Time statue in the distance, which works exactly how it always has, allowing you to access the upgrade menu where you can purchase items as well as blue and purple orbs. Although purple orbs and your DT meter won't be available until Mission 8 for story reasons. You can also purchase new moves, change your style if you forgot to at the start, or if you just feel like a change of pace, as well as upgrade your guns. Wait! I know what you're thinking. Sky, you railed against DMC2 for upgrading weapons, why aren't you mad about this now? Well, there's a few reasons. One, the damage values for the guns have been toned down dramatically, so they aren't totally broken, so a little extra firepower won't do any harm. Two, being able to improve your guns is actually vital in DMC3 because there's an entire style revolving around using them as your primary method of style accumulation. Not being able to make them more effective would render Gunslinger practically useless as the game went on. And finally 3, not every gun upgrades in damage. Rather, some increase their rate of fire or their bullet spread. The upgrades shore up the gun's weaknesses rather than blindly buff its damage. With that out of the way, we'll return to the Alley of Goodies, where you'll find your first blue orb fragment, you've got your hidden red orb crystals, you've got your secret missions, which are back to their DMC1 goodness with crazy bonus objectives, along with a brand new challenge, combat adjudicators. These statues are sprinkled throughout the game and are meant to help encourage players to vary up their attacks in order to make stylish combat feel more natural. They do this by challenging you to reach a certain combo rank and will get more difficult as the game goes on. They're also weapon specific, meaning you can't just get good with one weapon and expect to complete anywhere close to all of them. In order to get every blue orb fragment within the adjudicators, the game demands an at least mild knowledge of every weapon's mechanics and attacks. And speaking of the weapons, they're absolutely bonkers in this game, blowing both previous games out of the water. In fact, you earn your first new gun and melee weapon right out of the gate of the game. You're reunited with your old friend the shotgun in the bullseye bar, and for the melee weapon, you earn it by defeating the first real boss of the game. Which, while we're on the subject, the bosses in this game are mostly awesome.
Usul has called a big one! Again, it is the legend.
There are a couple that are fine but not the most amazing battles, but the majority of boss battles are fun, memorable encounters with great dialogue to bounce between them and Dante, and vastly unique movesets. Their designs and color schemes allow for them to stick out in your mind. It's really apparent that the artists had a lot of fun going nuts with just what could be possible designing demons. In fact, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but that's true even for the basic enemies. Each of them has a distinct color, gimmick, or sound cue that will cement itself in your brain. But what makes the real frontrunner bosses really stick out are the fact that they are your weapons. The 4 melee weapons you earn beyond just Rebellion are the literal souls of the bosses you defeated to earn them. Take the previously mentioned first real boss, the big angry pupper Cerberus. Once you defeat him and gain entrance to Temendagru proper, he transformed into Cerberus the Devil Arm, a 3-pronged ice nunchuck. And other than being rad as fuck and fancy, it also can do shit like deflect projectiles, an incredibly useful feature. And you can switch between 2 Devil Arms of your choice with the right trigger, just like you can switch between 2 guns of your choice with the left. This allows you to combo into a totally different moveset, making style points easier to earn if you get good at it, and also it just looks cool. So, with the first boss defeated and the game well and truly beginning, we...
Are you going to the party? What's the hurry? Didn't you get an invitation?
Oh, of course. How could I have forgotten the one true love of my life and the best DMC girl by a country mile? Lady. Lady's a bit of a switch from Trish or Lucia in that A, she's actively antagonistic towards Dante, B, she's 100% human and not a weird demon super soldier mommy clone, and C, has more personal investment in the story than Dante does, and has a well fleshed out arc with a ton of emotion behind it to boot. Devil May Cry is no stranger to physically strong women in its games, but as any writer worth their salt will tell you, it takes more than just making a female character badass to write a, quote, strong female character. Trish's existence pretty much revolved entirely around Dante. Lucia was an improvement, she got to do her own stuff and had her own issues outside of Dante, but her story wasn't given the well-paced development that could have salvaged it, and like everything else in DMC2, it felt rushed and slapped together. DMC3 frequently cuts back to what Lady's doing, interacting with other characters, and without getting too spoilery, she and Dante end up coming to blows several times and become foils to each other due to them having a lot in common. She's the possibility of another person he could have become, and vice versa, in the same way that Virgil is. And Virgil! Oh, Virgil. Easily the best DMC antagonist. I mean, there's a reason he's playable in DMC3 Special Edition, DMC4 Special Edition, and he's coming back for DMC5. And the crazy thing is, he's not even technically evil. I mean, he's a dick to be sure, and his actions are massively selfish and driven by a very warped view of the world, but he's entirely too noble to be purely evil in the way that Mundus or Arius were. As a minor spoiler, and it's pretty minor, it happens at the end of the first act, so like mission 7. When you reach the top of Temenegru to face him, you get a lot of insight into his motivation.
Foolishness, Dante. Foolishness. Might controls everything, and without strength, you cannot protect anything, let alone yourself.
And that's the most interesting thing. Protection. He's not doing this because he's greedy or because he's evil, per se. He wants more power to protect things, and somehow, Temenegru will lead to that. And after you think about it for a bit, you realize, and things start snapping into place. This whole thing, this whole pursuit of power, is Virgil's way, consciously or no, of coping with the trauma of losing his mother. Virgil takes a great amount of pride in being the son of Sparta, and obviously looks up to him more than Dante does. In his mind, Sparta was invincible. More an ideal than a parent. And when he lost his mother, that helplessness he must have felt, despite being the son of a legend, the thought that if he'd only been more like his father, that none of this would ever have happened, broke him. The worldview that this event fostered, that one must be powerful to protect what they care about, leads to its natural and inevitable conclusion in Virgil, that any means are justifiable if done in the name of acquiring power to protect oneself and whatever they cherish. And then you start to think about Dante, and Lady, and then you start to catch on to what this game is doing. Devil May Cry 3 is about a lot of things, about whether family is destiny, or if you can break away and become your own person, to choose who you want to be. Whether you really are your brother's keeper, or if the sins of the father do pass to the child, and if so, to what lengths are you willing to go to satisfy those responsibilities, to make things right. But more than that, it's a story about trauma and how you cope with it, how it changes the way you see the world and people. It's about 3 people, 3 kids, running away from the pain and burying it, and the destructive actions, regardless of the good or ill they might result in, that running away from it drives them to do, and whether they can overcome that and not only achieve whatever goals they've set out for themselves, but to find some closure and embrace their grief. Oh, so there's a clown in some parts, don't worry about it. Okay, that got a bit heavy there for a sec, but you see what I'm talking about. I wouldn't consider this video to be a particularly deep or insightful read into the game's themes, but hopefully with this in mind it encourages you to think on it while you play and after you've finished. Though just because you've finished DMC3 doesn't mean you're done, since the HD collection specifically uses the special edition. Once you've completed the game, at least on normal, you gain access to a lot of fun stuff. On top of unlocking hard difficulty, you also gain access to some alternative costumes, just like DMC1. That give you some different abilities, and more will be unlocked as you complete harder and harder difficulties. You also open up Bloody Palace, which, while I still wouldn't say is a great mode, it can at least be fun to pop in for a little while if all you want to do is enjoy DMC3's stellar combat and beat on some demons for a while. Probably the coolest thing that's unlocked, however, is the ability to play as Virgil. You can run an abridged version of the game's story with a few unique cutscenes but most others cut out, and experiment with Virgil's own style of combat. With a few exceptions, every move he performs in his boss battles are available for you to use, plus a few you might not have even seen if you'd only played normal, but you will see if you replay as Dante on hard. Also, much like previous games, there's Dante Must Die mode, plus 2 other difficulties. Heaven or Hell, in which everything dies in one hit, including you, as well as Very Hard, which I previously mentioned. Now, as we near the end of the video, I just wanted to mention a few nitpicks I have with the game to assure you all that I'm not going too easy on it. As is a consistent issue with the series, the camera still isn't the best. It's worlds better than DMC1 or 2's, and in large rooms you actually have the ability to pan it with the right stick if you need a different angle. However, it doesn't turn very fast and can easily get caught on walls if you're too close, and there's the classic incidents of losing track of Dante in hallways or choke points if too many enemies get in the way. So you might end up eating a few attacks you could have otherwise avoided. There's also, despite the much improved writing, voice acting, and translation, still a few lines that got lost along the way and come out either awkward or not making a lot of sense in context.
My soul is saying it wants to stop you!
Luckily this is rare and I can count the instances I can remember on one hand. You might also remember from my DMC1 video that I wasn't really a fan of a lot of the flying enemies that no-clipped through the environment. In DMC2 they were mercifully absent, retroactive point to 2 I guess, and DMC3 is without them as well. Until the last third of the game where these guys start showing up. To the game's credit, with the improved combat, camera, and everything, they're much easier to deal with than their brethren from 2001, but they're still annoying, powerful enemies that will likely give players on their first playthrough a rough time. Speaking of the last third of the game, without spoiling anything, the environments and skyboxes changed dramatically to some ambitious visuals for the time. Unfortunately, especially on the HD collection, the backgrounds look hideous. I was honestly shocked. I didn't remember them looking as bad as they did, but they are not pretty to look at. Finally, the special edition adds a series of additional bosses that weren't in the initial release, and while I understand that they were put in there as an extra bang for your buck, to people who already owned a copy of DMC3 and knew the events of the story, for perceptive new players it may run the risk of blowing a certain reveal at the end of the second act. All of this is small potatoes to me though, and I can personally look past this stuff and still say wholeheartedly that this game is in my top 5 favorites of all time. Possibly even my number 1. So with that, let's head into some tips and fun Easter eggs to finish off this video. One of the first things you're going to want to do is experiment with the styles. I would suggest getting familiar with at least 2 of the first 4, that way you can mix things up as needed without feeling overwhelmed with mechanics. My personal recommendation would be to switch between Trickster and Swordmaster, as they've always struck me as the most beginner-friendly and are very versatile. You can still feel free to try out Gunslinger and Royal Guard, as they're not a huge difficulty spike, but they do require a bit more creativity and timing respectively. That said, due to the nature of Royal Guard, the game will be slightly more liberal with green orbs dropping from enemies when it's equipped. The same rule generally applies to weapons, but as you'll be getting new ones throughout the game, it can be tough to know which 2 are your favorite until you've played most of the game and had a chance to try them all. That said, Rebellion, despite being your starter weapon, is always a solid, straightforward choice with equal viability across environments. It's the Ryu of your weapons, simple and pretty good at most everything. If you end up needing help learning the ropes of a new weapon, DMC3 introduces a feature that is a godsend, which is a combo menu. Just press left on your D-pad and go to Devil Arms. There, it will show you how to perform each move you've unlocked for each weapon, and even give you a visual of what the move should look like. The D-pad has a few more menus as well, including your map on the right D-pad. which you shouldn't need since DMC3 does a good job of making every room look unique from each other and the levels are mostly linear. Though there is Mission 15 where, again without spoilers, things can get a little confusing if you've never done it before, so don't hesitate to open it to keep your bearings. While you're exploring, if you're looking to complete secret missions, most of them can be spotted by an object having an out-of-place red glow to them. If you see something like that while poking around, go ahead and investigate. That said, that only applies to the secret missions inside the tower. Missions like, say, the first one are more hidden in plain sight, so don't get complacent if you want all those blue fragments. The combat adjudicators, on the other hand, are usually pretty easy to find. The first couple you come across will be fairly simple, only demanding a B combo or so, but later ones will demand a full-on SSS stylish. However, the game is fair and will adapt to how it scores you based on how many moves you have unlocked, and whether or not you have Swordsmaster equipped, so it's never totally impossible. Try to create a pattern of whatever moves you have unlocked, so that each attack is spaced out enough to avoid diminishing returns, and don't feel bad if it takes you a good while to whack that fragment free. Just think of it as valuable practice. Unlike the previous two games, DT is less abusable and should be used more judiciously. It drains much faster and heals your HP far less than DMC 1 or 2, so save it for when you're certain you're about to go in hard to maximize damage on bosses and tough enemies. That said, if you're getting swarmed or you just need to clear a group of enemies out quickly, you can use what's called a DT explosion. You'll need more than the default 3 DT orbs to use it, but once you have more, simply hold your devil trigger button down and watch for your orbs to start flashing red. The more you use up, the more damage you'll do as an AoE, but of course then you've just spent all that meter on one attack, so be careful how and when you use it. If the camera is giving you trouble whilst hunting down a pesky enemy, using your lock-on will usually turn Dante towards any enemy that might be positioned off-screen, giving you a sort of compass to follow. Oh, and again, while tiptoeing around spoilers, near the end of the game there is a sort of boss rush, but it seems Capcom was aware that boss rushes aren't everyone's cup of tea, so there is a perfectly legitimate way to skip most of it. Each boss correlates to a colored gem pictured here. You only need to create a circuit to proceed, so in other words, just find the bosses with 3 central gems over their portals and you can skip the rest. No shame in it, this game is tough and I'd much rather you see it to its end than try to play it the right way. Lastly, and this is just for fun, DMC3 has a couple extras and callbacks to find as you play. The easiest to find is in Mission 2 in the bullseye bar, right before you get the shotgun. If you smash the jukebox, it starts to play Locked and Loaded from DMC 1 briefly. Like a little note from Mitsuno and team saying, hey, remember that cool game? Us too. If you look closely during the first cutscene leading into Mission 1, you'll notice the picture of Dante's mother he had in DMC 1 is sitting on his desk in DMC 3 too, as well as a similar pinup on the bathroom door to the one that Force Edge would be mounted on later. And Dante offers the bathroom to Arkham. I'll call back to the first thing he said to Trish in DMC 1. A cool detail that I somehow never noticed before is that depending on your style rank, Dante will have different taunts and voice lines.
Come on. Let's start the party!
You'll remember I mentioned that there were 2 extra styles you could earn as you play. The last one you earn allows you to essentially create a Naruto-style shadow clone of yourself, which on its own isn't that exciting. But if you plug in a second controller, a friend can take control of that clone and briefly play alongside you. In the original PS2 release, once you unlocked the Super Dante costume, which grants unlimited DT, you could have the style active for entire missions, creating an unintended co-op mode. Unfortunately, Capcom killed the fun in the HD collection, and that style is now one of the few things that will still drain meter even with Super Dante. But the neatest one would be that in every cutscene at the start of the mission number is hidden somewhere in the scene. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it can be sneaky. Keep your eyes open and see if you can find them all. I appreciate those little details because they weren't necessary at all, but Itsuno and team did it anyway because they were just having fun making the game. And that's what DMC3 is, in summary. Just a lot of fun. Fun to play, fun to watch, fun to talk about. If there's one game in this series that I hope I have convinced you to play, it's this one. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I love this game to bits. It was a breath of fresh mountain air and a cup of tea after slogging through DMC2, and I would without a doubt consider this to be the definitive Devil May Cry experience. Maybe DMC5 will finally take the crown after all these years and become the new best game in my eyes, but it'll be a tough battle for sure. We'll just have to wait until March to finally see. But that's next year. In the meantime, I hope you really tear into this game and come to love it as much as I do. I wouldn't say it's underrated by any means, but as far as I'm concerned, more DMC3 fans in the world is a better world. With that, we're entering the home stretch, but we still have one more game to cover. And not only is it a doozy, but it's the most important game to be caught up on in preparation for the 5th game. Dante's had his time in the limelight, but now it's time for all of us to meet and greet the next generation of Devil Hunter. Well, that's Devil May Cry 3, better late than never. As you can probably tell from my scratchy voice and from some of the re-recorded lines in the video, I've gotten sick in the last leg of editing this, and that's kind of why it's a little late. I was gonna wait, or at least try to wait, until I was a little better to finish this up, because I knew there were certain parts of the video that I had to re-record, but after about a week of me not getting any better, and in fact getting sick all over again, I decided it's fuck it. The video's gonna be late no matter what, so I might as well do damage control and try to get it done as quickly as possible and hope that the lines come out okay. But I had a lot of fun making this one. Devil May Cry 3 is a very special game, as I'm sure you gleaned from the video, so I was kind of worried about this one because I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to satisfy myself and kind of give this game its due diligence, but you know, you're always your own worst critic, so after a while I just kind of had to throw caution to the wind and commit to a script, commit to whatever gameplay I'd gathered, and just throw the video together and hope it was enough, which in the end I think it is, but you know, I'm sure I'll look back on this just a month from now and be totally disgusted by it and question a whole bunch of decisions I made, but that's just the nature of creativity, I guess. Thank you for watching the video, of course. For any of you who stopped by, subscribed, or just left a comment. It's always nice to get feedback on things you've made. Still having a lot of fun making these, even though it takes me fucking forever. Getting sick doesn't help, but what can you do? I'm looking forward to doing Devil May Cry 4, even though I'm also simultaneously dreading it because that game was a goddamn beast, and there's so much shit to cover in the special edition that, I don't know, I might have to break it up into 2 videos. I don't know how I'm gonna get it done before March. I had all this time and I'm still running behind. Story of my life. But we'll do what we can do. I'm still looking forward to it. As per usual, you can find me on my Twitter and my Tumblr, which is not being deleted despite the troubles. You can find the links to those down below. You can send me a message there if you have things that you want to ask me about, you know, the videos or whatever. I usually put up sporadic updates about when I'm working on what. I'm particularly bad about doing that on Twitter, but I'm gonna have to get better about that. But every so often you'll see me post about, like, hey, I did a thing, I finished the script, I finished the recording, you know, whatever, stuff like that. So if you want to be slightly more up to date on what I'm doing, you can go follow me there, or just pop in every once in a while. If you don't want to commit, that's fine. I'm hoping to have the DMC4 video up by, you know, February, unless I'm cracking it into 2 pieces, in which case it might be a shorter video than usual, so it might get up faster, who knows. I'll see where the script takes me and go from there. But I've rambled long enough, and this is starting to hurt my throat, so I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate any and all views and comments that I'm given. I'm like a small dog that way. I appreciate any attention that's given to me. I hope to see you for the next video. I hope to see happy comments down below, and I will see you guys next time.